Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Black women currently hold 5 of the biggest beauty pageant titles in the world. Miss Jamaica, Tony Ansing, crowned as Miss World, and Miss South Africa, Zozibini Tunzi, as Miss Universe. These wins are particularly significant because of the beauty pageants industry's troubled with the history with race. For decades, women of color were banned from participating in some of the biggest pageants, so these wins are a big deal for diversity and representation. My guest, Gbemi Abudu, is the founder of BMGA, a luxury marketing and branding company that believes in the power of storytelling to change the narrative of not just her clients, but the African woman. She's not only excited at the fact that these 2 women won, but the fact that 5 of the top beauty pageant titles in the world are held by women of color for the first time in history, changing beauty the way the world sees it. Gbemi, what a great time to be alive. Correct? As a black woman, as a woman of color. Now they don't say black anymore. We say women of color.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes. Now tell me, first of all, let's talk about this great win for African women right now. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think it's very incredible because what it tells you is that the narrative and the way the world views beauty is changing. I mean, if I think of when I grew up, and if I take myself as an example, it's I struggled a bit with my complexion growing up because growing up, what I saw as the standard of beauty was...
Did you grow up here?
I lived in Nigeria before moving to the U.S., born in the U.S., but lived here, then moved to the U.S. when I was about 12 years old. And interestingly, my complexion actually started here in Nigeria, which I find that very interesting, where I felt,
really?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think it's more so what you saw around you, what you felt like was acceptable. I mean, what you're being told at home is different, but what you see in school and what you saw people reacted to or what people sort of had a preference for, it was unstated, but it was lighter skinned, mixed, and I grew up having a complex about my complexion. And interestingly, it was when I moved to the US and sort of dabbled in the modeling industry in the US, it's when I embraced my blackness and my complexion and saw myself as beautiful.
Your story is very rare, by the way. Okay, go on. Yeah.
So, because I know most people say the modeling industry does the, I mean, it has its own drawbacks.
But most importantly, the fact that you felt that type of disparity in Nigeria, because I personally, and a lot of women will tell you, I didn't know what it meant to be black until I moved to America.
Yeah, you know, I agree with that, but it was more so we're talking about colorism, not necessarily race.
But so, they're almost
so for me, it was more so, so what I find interesting with this win is it literally shows that the perception of beauty is changing. And the whole idea of there's a range of beauty, whether you're dark skin, whether you're light skin, whether you have natural hair, whether you have straight hair, it doesn't matter. A beautiful woman is a beautiful woman. And I think it's very important for little girls to see that growing up. And even more so, the fact that a lot of the beauty pageants have shifted from just focusing on the external beauty and looking at the internal beauty, they're looking at the achievements of the participants, they're looking at the charitable work that they're doing. I love the kind of message that is sending because it's showing that as a woman we're being well-rounded. Right? It's not just us relying on how we look physically, but how we're contributing to society. What are we doing to improve the economic, social, and political development of our countries? So I really like.
So you moved to America, and then you realized that you started embracing your.
Actually, I wish it was that simple. It wasn't that simple. When I moved, I still had my issue with my complexion.
Okay.
Truth be told, roommates of mine in college actually entered me for an elite model search.
Wow.
In Florida when I was doing an internship with Disney. And it was out of about maybe like 6,000 girls, 5 of us were finalists, and I was one of the finalists. So that was when I was like, okay, what are these people seeing that I don't see? And for me, that's when my journey of sort of self-acceptance and sort of being able to look at myself and say that I like what I see.
So why do you think this happened this year? These 5 beautiful women. Why do you think it took this long for this to happen?
Why it took so long, I can't say.
We don't know
We
yet,
don't
but
know,
why do you think this happened this year?
I think the needle has been shifting. I think there's so many things going on in the world globally that is really changing perception of beauty. I mean, It's you hear someone like Miss South Africa say that the whole idea of seeing someone like Obama as president of the United States lets her know that someone of her complexion can be anything in the world, right? You see all these women of color taking up space in society in different parts of the world. And I believe whether we like it or not, and that's where the power of media comes in too, like it subconsciously influences what we consider beautiful. You know, whether it's, you look at the rave around Lupita, when Lupita first came out, all those little things adds up to influencing how people perceive what's beautiful, where it's like, yes, I see a black woman on TV and I consider her beautiful, then, guess what? I'm being influenced in a very, very slow, subconscious way. Then also the whole narrative of it's not just about how the woman looks, what does she do for society? How is she contributing to the betterment of society? So I think all of that combined together, it just so happened that 2019 was the year where literally the 5 biggest pageants in the world, where it happened to be black women, and looking at the range of the black women, whether it's from Miss South Africa with the short natural hair, to looking at, you see Miss USA, I mean, light-skinned, curly hair, the range of the women who have won it, it's the range that represents blackness. Right. And I think that's amazing.
Well, talking about Miss Universe, Zosibini Tunzi, right? Yes. I remember her winning speech where she said that, you know, she would like to raise, she would like the world to, you know, accept the girl child and to have them take up space in the world, correct? It was such a powerful speech.
Absolutely.
You know, and I know your company, it's BMGA.
Yes.
Right? And it's a company that advocates for women and children, right?
Yes.
Tell us why.
Great question, actually. BMGA Enterprise Limited are actually a consulting company that were focused on the transformation of local enterprise with the use of marketing and capacity building tools. And it's very interesting if we say marketing and capacity building, how does that two come together? And as a marketer, I've been a custodian of brands most of my career, whether it's working for Louis Vuitton to working for a private jet operator in Nigeria. It's really understanding the power of marketing, like how you invoke emotion in people, how you tell stories, and to build a brand. Yes, you can tell an amazing story, but you need people who are actually going to do the work and deliver on the promise to consumers. So we started this company with the whole intention of helping organizations, number one, reskill and upskill the employees, because those are the people actually doing the work. And what I mean by that is we noticed, and I should say maybe more so I noticed when I moved here, is your average professional lacks some fundamental soft skills. And we wanted to understand what those soft skills were and spending a year doing research to identify what those core fundamental soft skills and looking at what can we do to sort of impact the market space here. So what we did was build a curriculum, and we help a lot of organizations to reskill and upskill their employees through transformative learning. Then the other side of the business, the advisory, which is the marketing, which they go hand in hand, because you're building this brand and saying, we're a fantastic company, but at the end of the day, it's can you deliver on the promise? So the capacity building is helping them deliver on the promise, but the marketing side is literally how do you tell amazing, compelling stories about a brand? And going back to what we mentioned earlier, for me, I find that it's very important as an organization to utilize our platform to change the narrative.
Yes.
And we work with clients who have given us the freedom and the liberty to actually do that. When we're creating amazing marketing campaigns for them, it's how do we impact and change the narrative of women, of children in society? Then in addition to that, we have several programs we're rolling out next year, actually, to target specifically what you mentioned in terms of advocating for women. So how do we narrow the gender skill gap? So we have a couple of interesting programs coming up, and because helping women impacts children. Yeah. And you can't say you care about children and be an advocate for children without caring about what impacts the life of women.
Yeah, I mean, in the industry across the spectrum of everything, right? The gender parity is huge, right? So how do we really narrow that gap?
Oh, that is a fantastic. A report was actually published recently. It was launched in Kigali in November. It's called the Gender Parity Report, and focused on how do we advance women's equality in Africa. And what I liked about the report is, because a lot of times when people talk about women equality, there's several misconceptions where people say, are you saying women and men are the same? And it's literally breaking it down, saying that's not what this whole issue about women equality is about. That with the gender parity is how do you ensure, they broke it down into 5 buckets, which it's a great way to sort of, how do you increase economic opportunities for women? you increase economic opportunities for women in Africa, by 2025 will contribute 316 billion to the GDP of the continent.
That's insane.
That's insane. Yeah. It talks about then investing in human capital, which is what BMGA do. It's like, how do you give women the necessary skills they need? And that's what the program's rolling out next year. How do you give them the necessary skills to be able to impact the economy of wherever society they exist in? Then the second thing that we can, and the third thing that we can't ignore is we talk about shaping attitudes. And that's what we do with the advisory side of the business is how do you change the perception people have about business? How do you let organizations become aware that some of the policies you have are actually conducive to one gender over the other? No one is saying that create a policy that favors just women, but it's like make sure your policies are gender balanced. So you have the whole issue of gender mainstreaming them, leveraging technology. Not just in Nigeria, across Africa, when you look at access to technology, there's a disparity with the access men get versus the access women get.
Right.
If you look at, as an entrepreneur, a male entrepreneur, access to financial capital, it's a lot easier for him than a female entrepreneur. So what are the things that we can do to narrow that? And the final thing is to ensure policies and laws and regulations are enforced. So as a woman, I mean, we know this. We've had several things that have happened in the country this year. It's how do you ensure that women are protected?
Correct.
I mean, women, not just, I mean, when I say women rights, how do you ensure the safety of women? How do you ensure that when it's all said and done, there's certain things that are not acceptable? And all of that impacts a woman's ability to be able to contribute to whatever society she exists in. So how do we narrow the gap? I think it's I make a call to every organization, seriously, to make it a focal point that we all have core values, and how do you ensure that you're contributing to narrowing this gap? Because other countries globally are being very intentional about it, and I think it's very important we are.
And you have a program, actually. Your company has a program. It's like I Am Every Woman campaign, correct?
So the I Am Every Woman campaign, we just rolled out this campaign for a client. So it's one of those where the whole idea of a client said, it's a perfumery in Abuja, and they said, Red Dahlia said, we need to create a campaign to let the world know we're here.
You know what? We're going to talk more about I Am Every Woman campaign when we come back from our break. You're still watching The Morning Show. Please stay with us. Welcome back to The Morning Show. We're still here with Gbemi Abudu, founder of BMGA. So before we went on break, Gbemi, we were talking about your campaign, I Am Every Woman, correct? Yes. Tell us about that. What inspired that whole campaign?
So when Red Dahlia reached out to us and wanted a campaign to let the world know that this perfumery is here, that carries a bunch of luxury, an exquisite selection of luxury fragrances for men and women, we thought that, you know what? This is an opportunity for us to actually create something interesting. We can either just do a typical perfume ad, or we can use this to actually really tell a story. And we chose the latter because that's what BMGA stands for, was creating a campaign called I'm Every Woman, and basically celebrating the versatility of women and the men that support them. And we thought that was very important because we're celebrating women, but women and men are allies. We both need each other. And basically showcasing a woman, showing the different roles she plays in her life, from being a homemaker to being a leader, to being a friend, to being a partner, to being a daughter, and just being a wife, showing the different range of it, then it's captured very well. I mean,
I remember seeing it on social media. I was like, wow, what is this all about? And it's so amazing that you captured the essence of being a woman so sophisticatedly, like the way you guys did. Tell me more. What have you gotten out of this campaign?
What has been amazing has been the reaction. Number one, the goal was obviously to create something beautiful, use it to change some narratives, because not just the images, the caption that goes along with each image is a very, very powerful, where it talks about, that one is I'm a champion, and where she talks about being an advocate for equal rights, being an advocate for children, being a voice of a generation. So the caption, that meant a lot. But the interesting thing had to be, you can do a beautiful campaign, but you also still have to create a desire for the client's product.
Right.
And the key thing was, we're talking about this amazing campaign, but also how do you create a desire for Red Dahlia and the perfumes itself? So it was very, very interesting to be able to find that balance of telling a compelling
this
story.
one image with this beautiful woman in the middle
In
of
the market. That's in the market in Abuja, yeah. And that's the thing, is like, who said, and this is, I'm a leader, who said a leader has to be in a suit? It's like, as women, we can be in a beautiful dress, and it doesn't change who we are. And it's that whole idea of we shouldn't be put in a box and be defined a certain way. We are and that's why it says I'm every woman, because we are everything. In the society we exist in, we are required to wear multiple hats. And it's not just the modern woman, like people will say. I'm like, no, our mothers have been doing this, where, they're business owners, they're professionals. At the end of the day, they're still homemakers. And I love that about, it's like the phenomenal elements of being a woman, and we wanted to celebrate that. And the founder of of Red Dahlia is a woman who sort of inspired that for me, like just the thinking of what do you want to do, and it's someone who embodies that. So the fact that she embodies them, like, she represents a lot of women that I know, that a lot of women at this, and we wanted something that, one, we're trying to check several boxes, if I have to be honest. First, create something very beautiful, something beautiful and elegant, done very well, of international standards. Number two, we wanted to use it to redefine and sort of change some societal narratives about what it means to be a woman. And honestly, it's like, we wanted to show African women just beautiful.
I think it's amazing. Now, we were talking earlier about capacity building. Now, talk to us about what it really means in terms of your soft skills that you're trying to grow in your company.
So what we noticed is that your average professional has good technical skills, right? They can, and there's on-the-job learning. But when we talk about soft skills, we're talking about your ability to understand what professionalism means. We're talking about what does it mean to be assertive. We're talking about critical thinking. We're talking about leadership skills. We're talking about presentation skills. Like, how do you present yourself in front of people? So it's being able to, and one of the things that we did that was very interesting, because research shows that a lot of training programs are actually not effective. So in order to develop something that was actually effective, we knew that we had to focus on how does the brain actually retain and recall information? And structuring the courses around that. So our classes are designed by applying anthropological learning theories and the science of how the brain retains and recalls information. And based on that, then the next step is we work with our clients, with the corporations, for the enforcement, because we find that you can teach someone something, but at the end of the day, if I feel like I'm not being tested on it, or I'm not being appraised on it, the likelihood of me retaining what I've learned is actually slim. So one is tackling the way the classes are taught, the way they're structured, the delivery of it, the presentation of it. Then the next step after doing that is like, okay, now how do you ensure that they retain and they use what they've learned? And we found that with our clients so far. I mean, it's the feedback we're getting is that even 5 months, 6 months after training, people are still applying what they've learned. And it basically just proves that our theory of how do you train people, instead of just focusing on the actual teaching, our approach is transformative way of learning. And we find that we believe that in the long run, that would really help in transforming the marketplace, because we want everyone to be competitive on the global stage. Because we live in a global village. I mean, saying you're competitive just in Nigeria is not sufficient anymore. It's, you have to be someone where I put you, you can compete with your counterparts in other parts of the world. And we have to ensure that the professionals here, not just in Nigeria, I say in Africa as a whole, can do that. And yes, there are many who are, but you also have a lot who are lagging behind. And it's how do you ensure that nobody's left behind and everyone is at par? That's
amazing. So your company is not just advocating for women, as like I said earlier, you're also an advocate for children. Talk to us about what you do for children.
So with children, there's an NGO. I mean, that's very near and dear to my heart, because I mean, when they say children are the future, I really take that so close to my heart. And there's a particular orphanage where sort of I've been working with for the past 4.5 years now, and on Saturdays going there to teach the kids and basically teaching them different subjects.
What do you teach?
So from history. That's very important. That's very, very important. Critical thinking, we do a lot of critical thinking exercise. I find that one actually very, I mean, history, it's amazing. And I find critical thinking very fascinating because it's that whole ability of telling a child to always ask why. Don't just tell me the sky is blue. Why is it?
Amazing,
And what we found fascinating very quickly is the kids would come back to class on Saturdays and say, Miss Gbemi, I got in trouble for asking why.
Really?
Yeah. that I got in trouble for asking why. And we talk about this, why it's one of the reasons, actually, I wrote an article, I think it was maybe last year or 2 years ago, called Are Our Children Allowed to Think? Because as kids, being very inquisitive, they want to ask questions.
Yes.
And you have to you can't stifle that. You have to encourage it. But you find that when kids are asking questions, sometimes people are like, well, because I said so. And I found that very interesting because they'll come back and I said, you know what, going forward, don't ask the questions. If you don't feel comfortable asking the question in class, don't ask, just bring it here and we'll discuss. And it just changed the class, like literally. I mean, there are times when they will ask questions that I don't even know. And I'm like, 1 second, let's check it on YouTube or Google it. And literally, I mean, there was a time when one of the kids, I mean, and this just tells you how inquisitive our children are. As a 7-year-old, and he was like, Miss Gbemi, what is the black hole and why does the black hole exist? And I'm like, I didn't wake up this morning thinking about black hole. Yes. And literally I was like, you know what? I will address that issue before the class ends. And I'm trying to remember, like, what did I learn in school about black hole and what do I know? I'm like, I watched National Geographic, but I don't remember anything about black hole, like in terms of the detail.
That is one question everyone would want to know. How did this world come about? Is this true that they say that the world was created in 7 days and all of that? Yeah. It's so amazing that you're able to do that as well. And then this school that you teach, do you contribute anything to the school or is it just teaching? No, I mean, any way I can contribute financially, I do. But the truth is, I really actually even don't talk about that because for me, it's there are several NGOs that I'm generally involved in and I support financially in whatever capacity I can. But what I found very important was actually giving my time. Yes. You know, my time to whether it's impacting a child's life. And fortunately, in this particular instance, is the children at this particular orphanage from the age of 5 to 9, and being able to just impact them, you know, and literally give them this. And I even say a step further is we actually teach them soft skills as well. So now that we are all here, we're here. Yes. It's a great time to be alive as a woman. Yes. Tell me, what do you think is the greatest thing that we can take out of this? I will have to borrow the words of Miss South Africa. Yes. The whole idea of teaching girls to take up space in society. Yeah. More so, I will add on to that by saying, I think we need to start raising our boys and girls differently. We need to start empowering them from a very, very young age and teaching them about leadership from a very young age. And when I say that is this whole issue about equality or gender parity, I really believe it starts from foundation of how we're raised, how we think. And that's what I would want everyone to focus on, being very deliberate and conscious of how we're raising our kids. Amazing, Gbemi. Thank you so much for joining me on this program. Thank you very much. Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. All right, I'll see you soon. See you soon.